Hello, my name is Nalani Brown. I'm the philanthropy coordinator at Frank Toby Jones, and we are picking up on chapter 42 of Rita Mae Brown and Sneaky Pie Brown's Cat on the Scent. Earlier that same night, Sarah, in a rage, had slapped her husband in the face, and he slapped her back. You forget your station, madam." He coldly turned his back on her. "You can't go out alone. You hire a bodyguard or I will. Don't tell me what I can do, and don't worry that I'll be killed. Whoever tried was a damn poor shot. You can be insufferably smug, and you can be a bloody nag." With some effort, she composed herself. What happened at the meeting today? Surprisingly, Archie thought you joining us was a good idea once he had time to adjust to it. And? Blair wants to consult his lawyer. It would give you and me overwhelming control of the corporation, and there is a small matter that you haven't invested your share of the capital. Ah, ass. He's a better businessman than I assume he would be. I thought he was just a pretty face and an empty head. What does he care what I put in or what % of the stock we own? He'll still make a boatload of money. Give him time. So you'll persuade him? Actually, I think you will. The telephone rang. Sarah picked it up. "Hello, what are you doing calling here?" Archie replied on the other end. "I'd like to speak to your husband, ma'am." She handed the phone to H. "It's Archie." "Hello, Arch. Forgive Sarah. She still believes you shot me." He listened a bit, chewed his lip, nodding in agreement with Archie's ideas. Finally, he turned to Sarah, who had flopped down on the sofa and pointedly picked up a magazine. "He'd like to speak to you." "No." He put his hand over the receiver. "Sarah, I insist. You must get over this absurd notion that Arch tried to kill me." Furiously, she stood. Her magazine slithered to the floor. She took up the phone. "Yes?" "I'm sure H filled you in on our meeting today." "Yes." "I think it would be beneficial to all parties if we sat down and talked." "Well, I have nothing to say to you." She glared at H, who made appeasing gestures. "Well, I have a great deal to say to you." He hurried his words before she could cut him off. "We need to talk, especially if we're going to be in this business together." "That's up to Blair Bainbridge." "Sarah, hold on." She covered the mouthpiece. "He wants to talk to me privately. Do I have to do this?" "I think it would be the best for all concerned." She removed her hand from the mouthpiece. "All right. How about my office tomorrow afternoon?" "Make it Friday. I have a dentist appointment tomorrow." "Fine, Friday, my office." She hung up the phone. "Friday, his office. Are you happy now?" "Yes, the sooner we get this behind us, the better." His jaw tightened. His eyes narrowed. Then, just as quickly as the tension showed on his face, he erased it. "It would be helpful if we knew who killed Tommy Van Allen and why." She flopped back down on the sofa, bending over to retrieve her magazine. "You don't think it was Archie?" Bain Tempest lowered his bulk next to her. "Much as I trust my instincts in business, I have learned not to jump to conclusions. We both know Archie Ingram doesn't have the guts to kill anyone in cold blood. You're using these events to express other repressed emotions, such as anger at the fact that I have kept you from my business. I've shut you out for a large part of my life, and I've treated you like a child." "Yes, you have." She lowered her eyes, then looked into his eyes again. "I'm turning over a new leaf. If Blair obstructs your inclusion in Teotan, I'll start another corporation and you can be president." He put his arm around her. "But I think he'll see the light of reason just as you will when Archie speaks to you. We were all such good friends once. Let's go back to the way things were." She put her head on his shoulder. "I'd like that." Chapter 43. Tommy Van Allen's memorial service on Thursday, intended to be a subdued affair, scandalized Crozet because his widow chose not to attend. It wasn't because she was too shocked to fulfill this last duty to her husband. She just didn't care. She'd already returned to Aiken, and she'd given Rickshaw carte blanche to ransack Tommy's records. She also allowed him to impound the Porsche for a week. He promised to send it to Aiken after it had been searched. Big Mim hosted a small luncheon after the memorial for Van Allen. Her prize-winning peonies picked that moment to open. Miranda Hagendauber strolled through Mim's magnificent gardens, which undulated down to the lake. The catamaran, Mim's Vim, gently bobbed in the water. The Reverend escorted her. Young people today have no discipline. Mrs. Hagendauber's hazel eyes were troubled. Jessica Van Allen should have come to the funeral. God knows she'll inherit all his money. Miranda, if people no longer dress as they should, it's an outward sign that they've lost all sense of propriety. Dress isn't superficial. I quite agree. Even Harry, who does have manners, falls down in the dress department. Poor dear. She has to be dragged kicking and screaming to shop. Susan and I are considering putting silver duct tape over her mouth on our upcoming foray. Not like my dear departed. Her motto was, shop until you drop. Herb Jones chuckled. They sat on the wrought iron bench, two old friends together. What's become of the world, Herbert? Oh, I don't know. Maybe every old person asks that question. But it's a cruder and more vulgar world than I once was a boy. But it's a cruder and more vulgar world than the one I knew as a boy. It's more violent. We thought the violence would end with World War II. Now we turn it back on ourselves. He drank in the refreshing sight before him. If nothing else, the gardens are flourishing. He patted Miranda on her gloved hand. Your tulips this year could have won national awards. Do you really think so? You outdid yourself. A sharp voice interrupted her enjoyment. You two spooning? I haven't heard that word since grade school. Herb burst out laughing. Tally Urquhart, moving slowly, but moving, descended upon them. Just what are you doing down out here, off by yourselves? You don't appear to be grieving. Are you? Miranda, usually not at all saucy, had been emboldened by Herb's praise. No, I've grieved enough in my life. After a while, you learn to say goodbye and be done with it. When your number's up, it's up. I should have been dead years ago, but here I am. You'll outlive us all. Herb stood up, offering her his seat. Tally balanced on her silver-bound head cane, lowering her silver hound-headed cane, lowering herself next to Miranda. The sheriff is taking Tommy's and Blair's cars apart. Yes, we've heard that too. Miranda shifted her position to face the vinegary lady. The vinegary lady. Won't do a bit of good. Why is that? Herb mildly inquired. Because science, machines, fingerprints. Oh, it's all very impressive. The how fills page upon page, but it's the why that matters. Ah, yes. Mrs. Hagendauber mused while watching two children paddle a dark green canoe at the far side of the lake. Such as, why doesn't Blair Bainbridge call on Marilyn? He doesn't appear to be in love with anyone else. She's certainly the most eligible young lady in the entire county. I think Harry is the most eligible young lady. Miranda surprised herself by contradicting Tally. She hasn't a so, Tally grumbled, then half smiled. But she's a far more interesting soul than my great niece. Don't tell Mimsy, though. She laughed in earnest. We ought to get Harry out of that post office. She's too intelligent for that job. Thank you, Herbert, Mrs. Hagendauber said, with unaccustomed sarcasm. Miranda, your husband was the postmaster. It's something else entirely. Oh? She graduated from Smith College in art history. Herb hoped this would explain his point of view without further insulting the memory of Miranda's husband. I graduated from Mary Baldwin, Tally said, and I never worked a day in my life. Of course, we weren't expected to then. You did work, Miranda said. Of course I worked. I worked harder than a stevedore, But you know what I mean, for money. I think it's better now. You do? Herb pressed. Yes, people ought to be able to pursue their talents. My point, Herb beamed. Harry is not pursuing her talents. But perhaps she is, Tally said. She enjoys life. She appreciates the clouds and all the peonies and us. She has before her every day at the post office the peerless entertainment of the human comedy. I never thought of that. Of course not, Herbie. You're thinking of your next sermon. Tally flickered her cane out at him. Now what are we going to do about this little Mim and this Bainbridge fellow? She'll perish if she doesn't land him. I tell her she's better off alone, but I don't think a young woman like Marilyn believes that. Nor do I. Herb folded his hands behind his back. Naturally, men need women. Women don't need men. Tally sounded triumphant. Fiddlesticks. He restrained himself from saying bullshit. Harry headed down to join them. Why is everyone suddenly shutting up? Because we were talking about you, Tally replied. Only good things, Miranda smiled. That's a relief. Mim trooped down to the lake a few moments after Harry's arrival. And what are you all doing down here? I need you in the garden. You are all the social spark plugs of Crozet. The small gathering looked up at one another with resignation. Then Miranda piped up. And what are you doing here, Mim dear? Came here to get away from all of them. They laughed together, which lightened the unexpressed tension and worry. Chapter 44. The day started quietly enough. It had dawned crimson, then gold. Harry knocked out her chores quickly, then decided to walk to work, given the exceptional beauty of the morning. Pewter complained long and loud about Harry's decision. Pewter hated being snatched without wheels. Harry hadn't gone a half-mile down the road before a low rumble captured her attention. Blair Bainbridge snaked around the corner, saw her, and braked. He opened the door from the inside. Hop in. I've got the critters. We'll squeeze in. I've been dying to ride in his car. Murphy sat in Harry's lap, forcing Tucker and Pewter onto the small back seat. Blair turned towards the farm. I've got to go to work. You need the truck. Didn't you listen to the radio this morning? No. Big storms are moving up from the south, fast. You need the truck. When they come from the south, they're wet. How long before they arrive? The weatherman isn't sure, of course. They always cover their butt. There's a high off the coast, and it might hold up for a bit. Oh, goody, Murphy sarcastically said. Not fair that you're in the front. Tucker stuck her nose between the seats. Ah, get over it. Selfish. Pewter leaned on Tucker as they turned down the long dirt driveway. Are you coming or going? Harry asked. Ever hear the one about the Duke who died in the prostitute's arms? The Bobby asked what happened, and she said he was coming and going. Blair scratched his head. Did I get that right? I don't know, but you're certainly in a good mood. I have 400 horsepower and 5,750 RPM. Of course I'm in a good mood. He pulled up next to Harry's truck. I'll see you later. Come on, gang. Pewter stubbornly waited to be lifted into the truck. I told you to take the truck. Nobody listens to me. Pewter, stop belly aching. Tucker found an old rawhide chew wedged in the seat just under the unused middle seat belt. Harry turned the key. That old familiar cough, then shake, was followed by the motor turning over. See that? Pewter put her paws on the windshield. What? The Blue Jay is sitting on the lamppost by the back door because he sees us pulling out. Could be because Mom throws out birdseed there for Simon and the birds. Miranda was carrying a big tray into market shiftlets just as Harry pulled into her parking space back in front of the post office. Let me help. There's a second one on the kitchen table. You fetch that one. Harry brought the flaky biscuits to the markets. He wiped down the counter, said hello to his former cat, Pewter, and threw scraps to the animals. H. Van Tempest called to tell me there's a reenactors meeting at his house tomorrow to discuss safety measures. I like that. He shook his head cynically. Are you going? Harry asked. Well, I bought all that stuff for the Oak Ridge Affair. I suppose I ought to get my money's worth. You could sell it. Pewter, ever the realist, suggested. He fed her another small beef scrap. She's a good mouser. Can't catch a bird, though, to save her life. Murphy stood on her hind paws to catch a tossed morsel. Tucker, too, grabbed a piece of meat from the air. She was very quick. Did he ask Archie to the meeting? Harry inquired. I don't know. The post office crew hurried to the frame building as Rob Collier tossed in the canvas sacks from the main office on Seminole Trail, also called Route 29. Time to work. Harry started sorting. The phone rang and Harry picked it up. Cynthia Cooper was on the line. Harry, can you come with me this lunch hour? Sure, what are we doing? I'll tell you when I see you. She hung up. Miranda, will you mind Mrs. Murphy and Pewter and Tucker for lunch? Cynthia asked me to go with her, but she won't say why. Official business, I guess. At 12, Cynthia picked up Harry in the squad car. Harry asked Miranda to cover for her for 2 hours. Within 15 minutes, they were at the airport, at the private hangar. Are you afraid of small planes? Cynthia asked. No. Glad to hear it. Cynthia bent over to fit through the small door, then reached out to pull Harry in. This is Bob Green. He's a pilot for FedEx. In his off time, he still loves to fly. Hi. Hi. The square-jawed pilot nodded a greeting. They taxied down the runway, lifted off, and were airborne in minutes. Harry, on the passenger side, looked down on the patchwork quilts of green, beige, and forest. Creeks and rivers glittered. The tops of buildings at Fashion Square Mall were flat. Boy, hope we never get 5 feet of snow. Bet those roofs wouldn't stress the load. Bet they can, Bob smiled, or there will be lawsuits up the wazoo. Cynthia, hand on the back of Harry's seat, leaned forward between Bob and Harry to hand her Tommy Van Allen's map. You grew up here. We're flying over these parcels. Tell me what you know. Bob flew over the first parcel, a high meadow adjacent to Sugar Hollow. Well, that used to belong to Francie Haynes, an old lady who raised Herefords, the horned kid. The horned kind. Haynes. The Black Haynes? Yeah. Anything special about the land? Not that I know of. As they flew over the parcel, Harry recounted the history as she knew it. Bob, can we go just up a little bit, another 1,000 feet or so, and make a big circle? Harry requested. No problem. Coop, look down. Can you see how the land folds together? Can you see the old reservoir at Sugar Hollow? Yes. Okay, we're flying over the watershed. See how everything drains essentially in one direction? That's where the state and some in the country want to put the new reservoir between Free Union and Earlysville. I can see it. Let's go lower to Sugar Hollow. Bob pushed the steering wheel down and they gently descended. Really obvious here. Cynthia strained to look over Harry's head out the passenger window, and I can see Francie Haynes' land. Now, wouldn't it make sense to use Sugar Hollow? Harry said. From up here, yes. Hey, you two. It's just us and the birds up here, said Bob. The landowners are bigger and richer at the other place. This is poor people. Used to be poor people. I mean, other folks are moving in now. And let's not forget the contractors. Cynthia shielded her eyes as they turned toward the sun. You know, when the state writes the specs for these massive projects, they write them so only a few firms can truly compete. What a crock of shit that is. Sorry, Bob. I don't know you well enough to swear. Fine by me. So there's nothing special about these parcels of land? Some are in the watershed and some aren't, but no, there's nothing I know of that marks these off. Why? Harry asked. I can't tell you that part. Since we're up here, can we fly over Tally Urquhart's? Good idea. Cynthia raised her voice because the propeller noise drowned out the normal conversation. The backside of Little Yellow Mountain. I guess Mint Springs is better coordinate. Okay. Within a few moments, they were cruising over the verdant acres, with miles of crisp white fencing that constituted the Urquhart place. The old hay barn and stone buildings came up into view. Bob, see that barn down there? How hard would it be to land there? I'm not asking you to land, she hastened to add as he descended. But how hard would it be? Cynthia asked. Not much of a strip. A little like threading the needle between the two hills. It would take a good pilot. How about in rain and fog? Harry asked. Take a pilot with brass balls and a sure touch. Chapter 45. The map lay open on Rick's desk. A pile of financial statements, account books, and a manila legal-size folder was stacked on the floor next to his chair. The watershed. He rubbed his chin. It's easy to see from the air, Cynthia said, then added, I checked the weather the night Tommy Van Allen died, or we think he died. You doubt the word of the coroner? When someone's frozen like a fish stick, yes. He slapped her on the back. That's what I like, an independent thinker. A storm came in quickly and hung on a long time that night, and then today, we just got up in time. As we landed, the clouds rolled down like a dirty gray rug. Was there any similarity of the properties from the air? Not really. Harry pepper you questions? No, she was pretty good. He sat in his chair, closed the door. He paused until she returned. I've read every comma, semicolon, period, and smudge on Van Allen's account books. He's clean. He swiveled around. What you're telling me is that Tommy was a damn good pilot. Yes, after seeing the small landing strip, he was better than good, Cynthia affirmed. H. Vane and Tommy already knew how to fly, Rick said out loud, even though he was really talking to himself. He had found no double set of account books. He wondered if perhaps the other fellow kept accounts. He was pursuing the drug angle, and they were all part of the Oak Ridge reenactment. At least, Tommy would have been. She nodded, and he continued. Coop, we're in the ballpark at least, but we still aren't on base. Could it be that these land parcels represent just what they appear to, investments against future growth? I guess I should say, for future growth? With the exception of two here bordering Sugar Hollow, they're generally in this quadrant. He took out a color copy he'd made of the map and put a ruler on the copy. With a red pencil, he drew lines, and a pattern began to form. See? He slapped his thigh. What I'd like to think this map represents drug customers, but when we checked the farms before they were purchased, no. There's no way old Ephraim Childs would buy drugs. I want to make this fit and I can't. I'm not sure why some of these parcels have new wells on them and others don't. I see that there are two roughly parallel lines. I see it and I don't know what it means. Think about what you saw in the air. Was there anything to suggest this type of alignment? Something obvious like a low hill chain or a creek? No. Besides, if there were a creek, it would be on the map. We'd have noticed it before. He dropped his forehead into his hand. When's the next commission meeting? Next Tuesday. Okay, well, we'll track this on the wall without saying anything. Has to be on the wall before anyone gets to the meeting. We might at least flush out Arch, he smiled. I think we're getting a little closer to our killer. Good idea, she said with a little enthusiasm. He fired his pencil at her, end over end. What? Nothing. Out with it. I've inherited your gut feelings, and this does not feel right. Maybe half right, but not complete. Yeah, I feel that way. But the look on your face, he's going to strike again, I just know it. Something's off the wall like Mrs. Wu's store. Something off the wall like Mrs. Wu's store. I think that was definitely part of this. The fire destroyed all her files. All those reenactor files. Well, she does bring us back to the reenactors, you're right. In a funny way, serial sex killers are easier to figure than this one. Rick mused. But there may have been sex. Don't forget the empty rubber packet in Tommy Van Allen's trench coat. Nah, I don't buy it. Coop sat on the edge of the desk. I hope I'm wrong, but this is far from over. H. Vane better hire a bodyguard. As she said that, a loud clap of thunder startled them both, and the heavens opened. Chapter 46. When the natural light struck Sarah Van Tempest's hair, the blonde highlights glimmered like beaten gold. Her fingernails, perfectly manicured, complemented long, graceful hands. Not only was she a beautiful woman, she had perfected young those wiles so useful in reducing men to putty. Since most men are taller than most women, the first trick she mastered, by 4th grade, was the disarming habit of lowering her eyes, then raising them as though only one object of her glance could fall forth such a promising response. She modulated her voice so it was never loud, never strident, a bit soft so that he would have to strain to listen. The more sophisticated snares, such as inflecting each sentence subtly so that it seemed like a question only he, with his superior wisdom, could answer, she acquired by 18. Lowering her shoulder a tad in his direction also sparked fire in the male of the species. The fact that these were calculated postures, as studied in an actress blocking on the stage, never occurred to men. Ever a man as highly intelligent as Sir H. Vane Tempest devolved into a quivering hormonal puddle in Sarah's presence. Her demeanor changed completely in the company of women. Her voice, straightforward, was not harsh, but certainly not music to female ears. She looked her friend straight in the eye. She said what was on her mind. She never once dropped a shoulder or slightly turned her body to make a woman appear larger. Her woman friends giggled when she'd switch gears the second a man entered the room. Her profound falsity, although a subject of amusement to most and disgust to a few, did not make women mistrust her. Each woman, even Harry, knew why women performed as Sarah performed. It was an unequal world. Beauty, short-lived, was a weapon to secure food, clothing, shelter, and status. Few women could stand alone and live well. They had to be attached to a breadwinner. Although bright, Sarah was essentially afraid of the world, afraid she couldn't move it on her own at the afraid she couldn't move in it on her own at the level she desired. She wasn't wrong. Few women have as much power or money as Sir H. Vane Tempest. She'd hit the jackpot. It was simple, really. She studied where the rich played. Since it was easier to get to Florida from Connecticut than to some other places like Aspen, she showed up fresh out of school, then carefully edged closer and closer to the good parties. She had also been careful not to do something stupid, like sleep with the wrong man or take a job in a clothing shop. That would diminish her mystery. She'd attend polo matches at Royal Palm Polo Club in Boca Raton. She'd watch, alone, hoping to catch a man's eye, or that of an older woman needing an extra for a party. Usually men were needed as extras, but occasionally a young woman was needed to pep up an older visiting gentleman. One Sunday at Wellington, west of Palm Beach, she happened to be standing at a string of ponies. The groom, called away by another groom needing help to catch a runaway, left a pile of polo mallets on the ground. They were organized by length and whippiness of shaft. Sir H. Vane Tempest thundered up. "Manual, 51 green." Sarah reached into the pile of 51s, having the presence of mind to grab the one with the green tape carefully placed where the shaft meets the head. H. Vane noticed immediately that Manuel had been changed by the good fairy into one of the most beautiful young women he had ever beheld. The rest, as they say, was history. An expensive divorce from wife number 1, who was, after all, showing wear and tear, soon followed. That was 7 years ago. Soon, very soon actually, Sarah would be showing wear and tear herself. Had someone whispered in her ear as she walked down the aisle that the price of marriage would be high, she would never have believed it. Lured by surface glamour, she didn't recognize the price was herself. She'd lost herself. Once she realized it, she panicked. Such women seek solace in religion, booze, drugs, charitable work, children, and of course, other men. When she walked through Archie Ingram's office door on Friday, she closed the door behind her. She had made a point of never going into his office or calling him at the office. "Did you shoot H?" "No." "Why not?" "I'd never do such a thing, you know that." "Wish you would," she said in jest, throwing her purse on the desk. He seized her by the waist, drawing her to him. She didn't resist. She kissed him, starting with the cleft in his chin. "I haven't seen you for 2 long weeks." Once the frantic mingling of body fluids was over, They had time to review their predicament. A black cloud seemed to follow Archie wherever he moved. As for her, glad though she was that Archie was out of his house, Sarah would never leave her husband. That was what she told Archie. Poor Archie cried. It's not that bad. She ran her fingers through his hair. It's not that good. H is a vindictive, combative man. He'd stop at nothing to ruin you. Discretion the better part of valor. She sighed. He's old. He's not as vigilant as he once was. Where I'm concerned, probably because his testosterone level has dropped. All will be well. Blinking back the tears, Archie moaned. I hate that bastard. I hate him because he's smarter than I am, and I hate him because he has you. He has me in body only, but not in soul, she quietly said. Maybe. He frowned, for as much as he loved her, he was learning to distrust her. But he knew I'd fall for the Teotan plan. The money is good. More money than I could dream of in my job. It wasn't until that meeting in Crozet, the one where Harry's cat jumped on the table, that I realized I had the most to lose. H, Blair, and Tommy risk far less than I do, but their profit is so much higher. She smoothed her hair. Arch, you'll clear a good $2 million and possibly more. I can't see what you have to lose. My reputation, my political career. I'll never be a governor. She hadn't realized his ambition reached that high. Other men have overcome scandal. This is Virginia, he snapped. Yes, well, there is that. Do you really think you could vault from the county commissioner to Richmond? Yes. I know I could get elected to the State House of Representatives for starters. One step at a time. But I blew it. He wiped his brow. Maybe you can buy your way in. Doesn't quite work that way. Money helps, but he smiled sadly. You haven't lived here long enough, Sarah. Disgrace stains through generations. The reverse of that is all those silly, empty snobs living off the grand deeds of their ancestors. No one forgets anything here. That's absurd. She did not believe it. Sarah, you're married to a powerful man. People would like you even if you weren't, but don't let surface acceptance fool you. I can ride, garden, and shoot with the best of Virginia's country squires, she boasted. So you can. He gave up trying to teach her the real rules of the road. Archie was on the verge of giving up everything. He felt so profoundly miserable. Sure you didn't try to kill him? It was a brilliant plan. She changed the subject, a jocular tone to her voice. No, I didn't. He pulled himself together, retied his silk rep tie, brushed off his pants. Sarah, you could have any man you want to play with. Why me? You have imagination. Most men don't. He nuzzled her neck. What kind of imagination? Did Tommy Van Allen have imagination? She drew back. About what? About you. Arch, don't be absurd. I know you had an affair with him. She waited, sighed, lowered her eyes, and then raised them. I haven't always used the best judgment. He made me reckless. Of course. I had no idea he was snorting coke. I was shocked as the next person when the Daily Progress reprinted the autopsy results. I never saw any sign of it. But then I'm not sure I know the signs. She sounded convincing. Is that why you went up in the airplane with him late at night with a storm coming, to be reckless? Archie played his wild card, for he didn't really know if she'd been with Tommy or not. He thought maybe he could trip her up. No. What'd you do? Give H sleeping pills? I never flew with Tommy. Are you suggesting I killed him? Maybe he got in the way. Of what? She pulled back, viewing him with dispassion. Your well-ordered life. Maybe he threatened to tell your husband. He might have thought H would throw you out. He'd have you all to himself. Tommy was reckless, but he wasn't in love with me. We occupied each other's thoughts for a while, that's all. You occupied more than thoughts. Tell me, were you sleeping with him when you were sleeping with me? No, she lied. Well, that's something, at least. Arch, sometimes if you let things alone, they work out better. My husband's an old man, and strong as an ox. He'll live to be as old as Tally Urquhart. I wish I did have the guts to kill him, but I need him. For what? Teotan. In for a penny, in for a pound. I can't back out no matter what I'm sacrificing. Blair's smart enough to run the corporation. Don't underestimate him. And thank you for speaking up for me at the meeting. She kissed him on each cheek and then the mouth. I was only kidding about killing H. I could understand if you had shot him, but I'm glad you didn't. You certainly ran your mouth about it all over town. Arch, what better way to cover up our tracks? Your tracks. He coolly appraised her, but couldn't protect himself from her beauty. My tracks? Sarah, you could have shot H. You weren't at the reenactment. I ran back for H's canteen. Prove it, he smiled softly. You are as bad as Rick Shaw, she laughed it off. I found witnesses who saw me running back to the tent. You could easily have ducked behind the hunter barn or into the woods or even in your Range Rover if you ran fast enough and managed to creep out of the woods. You could have fallen in at the back of the marching line. In that gown and hoop? Are you insane? No, you changed, of course. He breathed in sharply. I did not shoot H. Vane. Tommy was already dead. If he had a motive, it died with him. You are the only person with a motive. And what about Blair? If H were out of the way, you and he could run Teotan. 2 people would control the new water supply. It's an interesting theory, but if Blair and I were in cahoots, I'd know about it, and... He held up his hands in question. Unperturbed, she said, you could have killed Tommy and tried to kill H and intend to kill Blair. All threads would be in your hands. Thank you for giving me credit for being that intelligent, but I didn't do it. I wouldn't do it, and the rock bottom reality is I'm not smart enough to pull off a crime like that and not get caught. You, on the other hand, are. I didn't kill Tommy Van Allen. Not even to cover your tracks, as you say? Well, then you'd be next on my list, wouldn't you? I think I would. Am I? No, darling, I adore you. Can't you tell? Can't you tell when you hold me? He sighed. Sarah, I don't know what I know anymore. You're angry at me because I won't leave H right now. I can't, Archie. We'd have a year of passion if we were lucky, but sooner or later, the outside world would tear us apart. My way takes longer, but the result is more solid. H is an old man. Old and healthy. Old and frighteningly intelligent. But still old. She put her forefinger to his lips to silence him, then kissed her forefinger and his lips simultaneously. Arch, let me keep saying dreadful things about you. It's the only hope we've got. It's the only cover we've got. You know the truth, and you know every chance I get, I'll come to you. She ran her fingers across his lips, then along the side of his jaw. He kissed her hand. That fool doesn't know what he has in you. As long as you know. It's funny. I would have thought you'd have the affair with Blair, not me. He's a lot better looking than I am. He still didn't know whether to believe that what Ridley Kent had told him. Chemistry. She brushed her hair with a few practiced flips of her wrist. Besides, little Mim would die. We've got to leave her something. Ridley told me that you had a brief fling with Blair. Archie couldn't stand it any longer. He had to hear her response. Coolly, too coolly, Sarah said. Ridley's put out that I refused his advances. Why listen to him? I can't believe you listened to him. I don't know, his voice wavered. Well, I do. She kissed him again and then left for home. Chapter 47. The underside of a Porsche is sealed. It's as though the bottom is covered by a series of interconnecting skid plates. The mechanic, in white overalls, removed one gray underbody rectangle. Rick peered up as the mechanic shone a light. Couldn't hardly hide a tin of snuff up there, the mechanic said. Would you like us to remove each panel? Mike Gage, the owner of Pegasus Motor Cars, politely asked the sheriff. No, bring her down. Body panels make more sense. Of course. Blair Bainbridge watched. You aren't going to cut the upholstery, are you? He had cooperated with the search, not demanding a warrant, but he wasn't sure what he'd do if it went that far. I don't know. Rick ducked his head in the car once it returned to earth. There's no place to hide anything in those back seats. Hardly big enough for a cat. Somebody could remove the padding in the front seats and replace it with cocaine. I think you'd be able to feel it, though. Mike pressed down the seat. Harvey, Bring up the new Targa. Let him feel those seats so he has a point of comparison. Within minutes, a lush polar silver Targa gutturally announced its arrival. Rick opened the door. The smell of a new car made him giddy with possibilities. Dutifully, he pressed on the seats, then pressed again on the seats of Blair's Turbo. Blair, clasping and unclasping his hands, murmured, "Look, I don't know why you're doing this. You know I'm not involved in drugs." "Your buddy Tommy Van Allen sure was. Cocaine packed behind his hubcaps. Come on, it must have given you a charge to fake out everybody." "No," Blair replied flatly. "Fast money, fast cars. Look, I don't sell drugs." Mike Gage interrupted the increasingly tense exchange. "Let me show you something, Rick. See these air inlets on the front end?" "Yes." Rick pressed at the small sloops in the metal. Could stash small amounts of coke in them, but it would lead to undesirable consequences later. Mike had briefed Rick earlier on the basics of an air-cooled engine. Blair spoke up. "If I was going to deal drugs, I'd find a better place than that." Rick ignored him as Mike continued to point out small areas where drugs could be secreted. Blair shifted his weight from foot to foot. "You know I'm innocent." "You knew about Tommy." Rick pushed him. "Tommy didn't run drugs. It's crazy. A Porsche attracts attention. It'd be crazy to carry drugs in a Porsche." "If you don't calm down, I'll haul you out of here," Rick threatened. "Listen, I'm allowing you to search my car out of courtesy. You don't have a warrant. I have nothing to hide, so give me some credit." Mike looked away as Rick scowled. Rick hesitated a moment, then spoke to Mike. "Don't rip up the leather. Keep searching, though. Mr. Bainbridge and I will be right over here in the squad car if you need me." "Okay," Mike nodded. Blair slid into the squad car passenger seat, slamming the door. Rick wedged himself behind the wheel. "Would you like to tell me the purpose of Teotan? I have Tommy's maps. I know you've sunk wells. Let's have it." Blair waited a moment, then cleared his throat. Teotan's purpose is to supply potable water to the northwest quadrant of the county while saving the taxpayers considerable expense. We were intending to present our plan at the next Water Commission meeting. Next week, in fact. "No new reservoir?" Blair shrugged. "My hope would be no. Teotan could save this county a fortune in construction costs. There's enough water running underground to fill the need. Millions of gallons." Rick dropped his head a moment, then raised it. "Sir H. Vane Tempest said the same thing. It is a good plan." "Have you approached Archie Ingram?" "He opposes any idea of H. Vane Tempest. Rick didn't know of Archie's involvement. For H. Vane Tempest, true to his word, he said nothing." "Archie's a weather vane." Blair sounded non-committal. "He's not the same man since his wife kicked him out. Wasn't impressed with the original." Rick sighed a long sigh. "I'm a paid public servant. I'm not supposed to harbor political opinions." Blair shrugged. "Won't go past me." Changing the subject, "What are you going to do if the county rejects your concept? I suppose you have supporting figures?" Rick asked. "We do. Much of the $750,000 apiece we each put up to create Teotan went for a feasible study. We used a firm out of Atlanta. Washington, New York, and Richmond were too close in the respect that too many people from Albemarle work in those cities or have strong cities there. What we are about to offer this county is economical and sound. And what if they reject it? If we can get it on the ballot as a referendum, I think we'll prevail despite the vested interest in reservoirs and dams. But should we fail, we'll sell the water as bottled water. You'll have to tap dance again on that one. Environmental studies and water purity." He shook his head. "We're so overregulated. It's lunacy. Generations of Virginians drank water right out of the ground. They had more common sense. They didn't build on drained marshland or put their homes where runoff would leak into the well. People sit in front of computers and know nothing of the real world. We're prepared for bottled water battle. We've retained Fernley, Stubbs, and Marshall in Richmond." "Then you're prepared." He tapped on the steering wheel. "One member of your company is dead, and no suspects. One member was shot. Many suspects, including Mr. Ingram. Is there something about Teotan I ought to know?" "No." Rick warned Blair. "If I were you, I'd look over my shoulder. I don't think it's a coincidence, but I still couldn't say why exactly." Unfortunately, I don't know why either. If our plan works, it means a steady flow of profits as long as we live. If one partner dies, his share is equally divided among the survivors. On the surface of that, it would be motivation for murder. Blair, have you seen this ticket before? Rick reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a white locker ticket, number 349. Blair examined the Greyhound locker ticket. No. We found this in Tommy's car. I assume you went to the locker. Yes, we found accounting books for cocaine deals. That's too easy. I know Tommy Van Allen wouldn't sell drugs. No way. Rick paused. Actually, Blair, I think you're right, but I have nothing else to go on. I don't sell drugs. Tommy didn't sell drugs. I don't know what this is about or why, but it's not true. Is there something about Teotan I don't know? That might be bearing on this case. Blair, for God's sake, a man has been killed and another wounded. Tell me. Blair inhaled sharply. Archie is a hidden partner. Arch doesn't have that kind of money. You other boys put up big bucks. He put in work. Blair left it at that. Rick whistled. He's using public office for private gain. And H. Van Tempest risks nothing. Archie risks everything. H. Vane risks the startup money. That's nothing to him and you know it. Rick turned to face Blair. This changes everything. I don't know. I mean, yes, it compromises Archie politically, but people's attention span is 2 minutes. Look at all the crap politicians get away with, Rick. I'd say Archie Ingram has more motivation to kill than any of you. He'd be sitting atop a fountain of profits. It doesn't seem possible. A lot of things don't seem possible, but they happen anyway. Blair, I'd be careful if I were you. Chapter 48. Mrs. Murphy slept on the divider counter, her tail hanging down. Pewter, on the back seat of the small table, meowed in her sleep. Tucker snored under the big canvas mail cart. Harry felt like sleeping herself. A low-pressure system was moving in. The front door swung open as her head nodded. She blinked. Dr. Larry Johnson waved. I'm ready for a nap too, Harry. Where's Miranda? Next door. She's planning a menu for market. He wants to sell complete meals. It's a good idea. And Miranda will cook them? Part of them. She works hard enough as it is, and the garden comes first. Larry eyed Murphy's tail. Tempting. Harry stood on her tiptoes, leaning over the counter. She's proud of that tail. Mrs. Hagendauber entered through the back door. Hello, she sang out. Mrs. Murphy opened one eye. Keep your voices down. Sarah and Sir H. Van Tempest came in with Herb right behind them. Glad I ran into you, Larry said. He walked back outside and returned, handing Van Tempest his Confederate tunic top. Is this genuine homespun? Van Tempest examined the material in his hands. Miranda flipped up the countertop and walked out to the front. I can tell you. Ugh, I wish everyone would just shut up. Mrs. Murphy opened both eyes. Tucker lifted her head. They complain when I bark. Miranda held the material in her hands, rubbing it in between her forefinger and thumb. Machine. How can you tell? Van Tempest held the other sleeve. If this were spun on a home loom, there'd be more slubs and the color dye wouldn't be as even. Also, the boys in gray were often called butternut. Dyes weren't color fast, you see, and dyeing could be an expensive process. A foot soldier would wear homespun for so long that the color would go from a sort of light brown to a gray-white over time. Harry joined them. Bet that stuff itches to high heaven. Your shirt would be spun from cotton, probably better cotton than what you buy today, Miranda noted, so you wouldn't feel your tunic so much. Harry took the jacket from Van Tempest, slipping it on. Herb laughed. You'll drown in that. Mrs. Murphy sat bolt upright. She soared from the counter into the mail bin. Wake up! Damn it! Pewter, surprised and therefore scared, spit at Murphy. Tally and Big Mim dropped by to pick up the mail. You know what I don't understand? Tally put one hand on her hip. If a man dresses a woman, everybody laughs. They'll pay money to see him. If a woman dresses a man, stone silent. If a man dresses as a woman, everybody laughs. They'll pay money to see him. But if a woman dresses as a man, stone silence. By now, Pewter had hopped into the divider counter, and Murphy roused Tucker, who padded out front to the people. Want to try? Harry handed the tunic to Big Mim. I'll leave that to the boys. That's it, Murphy crowed. Pewter blinked, thought, then she got it. So did Tucker. That same afternoon, as Sarah fed the domestic ducks on her pond, private investigator Tariq Salid discreetly delivered county commissioner tapes to her husband, as he did once a week. He'd bugged Archie's office along with the others. Vane Tempest did not fully trust Arch and wanted to make certain he was getting his money's worth. Also, this way he could keep tabs on the other commissioners. Surprisingly, Arch had not disappointed him. He was really working for Tio Tan's acceptance. He was all business. However, this week's tape proved substantially different. Tariq handed over the legal-size folder, then swiftly left. Chapter 49. The brass buttons rolled around in the palm of her hand with a dull clink. Harry pushed them with her forefinger. First Virginia. Blair leaned against his 110 HP John Deere tractor. New, of course, like everything else on his farm. They're genuine. Cost $550. Wonder who wore them if he survived the war. Blair shrugged. I don't know. The warm sun skidded over Mrs. Murphy's coat. She glistened as she lounged on the hood of the 911 Turbo. Neither human had yet noticed her chosen place to display her glories. Pewter prowled around Blair's equipment shed with Tucker. She was on a blue jay kick. Determined to find and bait the raucous bird wherever she could, she sharpened her claws on the side of the shed. Pewter could perform surgery with those claws. Looks like you're throwing yourself a whole hog into reenacting, Harry said. I kind of thought it was silly at first, but I felt something at Oak Ridge, and Harry, that wasn't even a true reenactment. We weren't on sacred ground, if you will. I want to go to the 7 days. Sharpsburg. He looked sober at the word. Sharpsburg was the scene of the worst carnage in that bloodiest of wars. I can't explain what I felt. Just that I have to do this. Have you ever noticed that all the reenactors are white? The combatants are mostly white. I'll feel a little better about this when someone resurrects the 54th Massachusetts. Harry cited all the black regiment renowned for its courage. Harry, I'm sure someone is already doing that. Really, I don't think this is a racist program. His warm hazel eyes flickered. Maybe you're right, she sighed. Maybe it's me. Maybe I don't like being reminded of a war of supreme foolishness. A foolishness that soaked this entire state in blood. So many battles have been fought here in Virginia since the Revolutionary War. All that blood has soaked into our soil. Makes me sick, kinda. I think I fail to see the romance of it. Maybe it's a guy thing, he smiled. Guess so. She paused, then swung up into the cab of the elegant, expensive, coveted John Deere. Blair, I've been thinking. A guy thing? She said louder and than she intended. What if Sarah was in uniform? What if she shot H. Vane? What? The animal stopped in the shed. Mrs. Murphy, on the porch, pricked her ears. I know it sounds crazy, but today in the post office, when I tried on the jacket, it occurred to me. She could have worn the trousers under her hoop skirt, stepped out of it. Of course, she'd have to run back like mad to get out of the uniform, stash it, and then get back into her dress, but it's not impossible. Heavy smoke covered everything. You couldn't see the hand in front of your face sometimes. And it was pandemonium. Who would notice one person sneaking off? And besides, nobody noticed H had been shot for quite a while. She would have had time. He blinked. I don't know, I never thought of it. Mrs. Wu made lots of uniforms. Too many to remember, but she probably kept receipts, if not records. So what happens? Her store gets burned down. Blair wondered if Sarah was capable of murder. Harry, that's pretty extreme. But why? Everyone jumped to the conclusion that it was Archie Ingram. Slowly, his deep baritone low, Blair said, Well, I don't know, it's possible, but why kill him? She'll eventually inherit his estate anyway, most of it. He's a tough bird and demanding one. She's in the prime of life. Servicing H. Vane, you'll forgive the expression, maybe losing some of its luster. His face reddened. Mrs. Murphy carefully slid off the Porsche hood. She walked over to the tractor as Pewter and Tucker joined her. Harry stepped down from the cockpit. Nice, huh? Beautiful. If I had to pick between your Porsche and your John Deere, it would be one of the hardest decisions of my life. She laughed, leaning against her giant rear wheel. I think I'd better call Coop. Don't do that, he said too rapidly. Why not? Because you can't ruin someone's name like that. She's not ruining her name, Mrs. Murphy said. She's only conveying an idea. Coop has tact. Hadn't thought of that. Mother, you're not ruining her name, and you're right, Pewter meowed. Harry picked up the cat, putting her on her shoulder. Hush. Put me down, she wriggled. Pewter, stay put. You'll get her mind distracted. Humans can't focus for long. That's why we can't catch mice. That's why they can't catch mice. Pewter glared at Mrs. Murphy but settled down on Harry's shoulder. Tucker lifted her nose in the air. Blair's body temperature is rising. He's upset. The other flaw in your theory is that if Sarah shot at H. Vane, then who killed Tommy Van Allen? Blair said. There's no proof that the two murders are connected. We've all been assuming. They could have been related. They're related, we just don't know how. Tucker was resolute on this point. Blair blushed. Yeah. What's the matter? Took her a while, Pewter dryly commented. Oh, he clasped his hands behind his back. Nothing. Say, would you like to borrow my tractor? You could disc your fields in 1/3 of the time. He pointed to a disc, its round metal spheres tilted slightly inward toward a center line. Murphy noted, that's a quick change of subject. Harry eyed the huge implement, which would make short work of her chores. Good farmer that she was, she diced first before plowing. She diced the fields for hay too. They didn't need plowing, but she was a great believer in working the soil thoroughly before planting. If the hay was already established, she'd merely thatch and aerate every few years. She loved farming, desperately wishing she could make a good living from it, but she just squeaked by. This is brand new. Hell, you know how to use this equipment better than I do. Tell you what, Harry would feel better if she could make a trade. I'll show you how to prepare that cornfield you want to put down in your bottom land, then I'll borrow this baby. She patted the green side of the square. Powerful tractor. Deal. He stuck out his hand, then withdrew it. Sorry, I forgot my manners. Oh, Blair, I don't care. I think that stuff's outmolded. She referred to the fact that a man wasn't supposed to extend his hand to a lady, but to wait for her to extend hers first. Big Mim would kill me, he grinned. Harry noticed Archie's U-Haul. Is he ever leaving? Today, in fact. Bet you're relieved. Archie is curiously stubborn. What a nice way of putting it. Harry smiled as she headed for her truck. Where's he going? Tally Urquhart's. What? She'll let him live in one of her outbuildings if he'll restore it. He said he needs a positive project. I'm nervous. The tiger walked out to Harry's truck. We've got to get her to call Coop. It was a little bit too late for that. All right. That was chapter 49, so we will pick up on chapter 50 next week of Rita Mae Brown and Sneaky Pie Brown's Cat on the Scent.